Therese Huston, welcome to the Experts Interview. It is an honor to have you here. Thanks for joining.
It is so fun, Art. Thank you for having me on.
We've had a great dialogue going back and forth over the past couple of weeks, and we're recording this, about a week or two ahead, a week maybe ahead of the launch of your new book. How do you feel to be on the brink of this book launch?
Oh, thank you for asking. It's very exciting. This is my fourth book. And with each one, I learn new things. So, for instance, with this book, I'm learning how to make Instagram videos, right? 4 years ago with my last book, that wasn't so much of a priority, but I'm very excited. I think this book will be so helpful to people. And so I'm excited to get it in the hands of leaders and just anyone who wants to manage themselves and manage others.
All right, so I'll provide the punchline here. I had a great chance, thanks to you, to read through the galley, the e-galley. It's challenging, by the way. I tend to be a physical book reader for the most part with a tablet so I can annotate sometimes. But oh my gosh, is this a great resource? It's truly a wonderful resource for all of us. And you know what? It's serendipitous that your book on helping us improve our lives with brain science is coming out at a point in time when I think we may all need a little bit of what you have to offer in this. So, what great timing.
Thank you so much. In fact, there's two, there could be many things to which you're referring when you say this comes at a
Right.
great time, but I know a lot of people are feeling under incredible stress, whether that's about, the time that we're recording this, there's a lot of stock market fluctuation and concerns about
There is, I
recession.
missed that.
You missed that, right?
It's a daily
And
dialogue. Allison, we're going to have to work 5 more years. Allison, we're okay.
exactly. Up, down, up,
Yep,
down.
yep, yep.
And yeah. And so there are two chapters on stress in the book. And
Mhm.
I, although I think there are going to be many chapters that people immediately jump to, I think those might be two that people are going to find most useful right now.
All right, so a couple of confessions. First, I view myself as an armchair neuroscientist. A very poor, worn out, not expensive armchair neuroscientist, but and you're going to chuckle at this, but in just about every one of my either senior manager workshops or my manager development, there's so much neuroscience that's influencing what we do to develop as leaders and managers in this world, and I love it. But I will always poll the audience and say, by the way, is there a neuroscientist in the audience? I haven't had anybody raise their hands yet, and truthfully, I'm a little frightened that somebody, well, oh yeah, Art, I am a neuroscientist. Because the stuff that I describe and cite, of course, I'm not sure I do an apt justice to it, but you have a superpower, Therese, and I think somebody highlighted that to you. Your superpower is to take difficult concepts and make them not only easy to understand, but eminently practical to apply them. And I just think that's a gift. And you did that in your book, Let's Talk, which is where I first encountered your work. Single best book I've ever encountered on feedback, by the way. So for everybody listening out there, Let's Talk is just an amazing resource. But I mean, you recognize you do have this unique skill set?
Oh, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for all those kind words and compliments. They warm my heart. And this has been a goal of mine since graduate school to take research and make it useful, and not just useful to other neuroscientists or not just
Sure.
useful to patients, but to useful to everyday people who have normal or are struggling and trying to have normal cognitive abilities. And finally, the neuroscience research has gotten to a point where it can actually really be helpful to all of us in our home lives and our work lives. And so it was very exciting to realize that neuroscience had reached that point a few years ago. And so I started putting together like, what are the most actionable tips? What are the things that people can do easily that don't require you to go on a week-long meditation retreat, which I want to do someday, but even I haven't done that. So but thank you for the compliment. I really work hard to figure out how do we take what scientists are finding and make it helpful.
It comes through loud and clear. So I love that the book is divided into two sections: Thrive 9 to 5 and Thrive the rest of your day. I think that's good. We can all use the content in Thrive 9 to 5, and we can use it with our teams and as managers. It's good to know it and so forth. But Thrive the rest of your day, makes this really personal to all of us. So just a great structure to the book. And I'm glancing at my other screen here. So you make some bold promises. So one is with this book, in these pages, I will give you tools so that you can be on when you most need to be, at work, at home, and everywhere in between. Neuroscience is here to unlock your potential. You might add, as the reader, add gray matter. I'm pretty excited about that. You might become a sharper version of yourself. Doubly excited about that. And it's a lot of just serious science filtered for practicality. So, talk about those bold claims and why you're so excited about what neuroscience can give us.
It's interesting. One of the reasons I believe that I can make those promises is
Mhm.
I have wrapped myself into so many of the practices that I describe. And I tell my stories throughout the book. I tried this one and here's how I had to adapt it, or this didn't quite work for me, or this might work for some individuals, but here's how I found it was realistic for me. So I test drove just about
That's
every.
cool.
It is, yeah. And what I found is that I have gotten so much sharper as a result. So I'll just tell one brief anecdote. I don't know about you, but during COVID, I became a bit of a news cycle junkie in the mornings, right?
Hmm.
I would be checking the CDC maps. I would be looking at like what are the patterns of where are they spiking?
Right.
I'd be looking at, you know, there were certain video clips coming by different leaders that I wanted to check out. So every morning I felt like I was being a good civil
Yeah, sure.
individual
Sure.
by checking that out. Unfortunately, though, it led to a lot of bad habits. I used to, prior to that, I was not someone who checked the news in the morning. Anyway, once peak COVID passed, I would still spend time, shopping on Amazon or checking other news feeds. And I had developed some really bad habits of not getting into my work right away when I sat down on my computer, and too much time was elapsing. So I realized I needed more focus, and I began to look at what does neuroscience teach us about getting focused quickly. And that's where this book began, was in my
Hmm.
own need for, I'm seeing myself feeling more scattered, less purposeful, and how do I get to the reason that I'm sitting down at my computer faster.
I have to think so many of us can relate to that, even in, present circumstances, for sure. Now, truth serum question, did you ever check those feeds in the middle of the night?
you
Mm.
know I don't in the middle of the night, thankfully, but what I do, I have real problems with insomnia, so I have to
Uh-huh.
stay away from those things. But what I do in the middle of the night is I often listen to sleep stories to help
Ah,
myself go back to sleep.
uh-huh.
And so I've had to learn what are the things I can do on my phone so that it doesn't wake me up, right? Obviously, focus mode, putting it into sleep mode, but also putting it in a red spectrum. Do you know about that?
Sure, sure. Yeah, yeah. Change the light. Yeah.
Change the light, yeah, so that it's, instead of having more of the blue light, which is typical for a cell
Screen.
phone,
Yeah.
smartphone, move it to a more red spectrum, and that's less activating. It doesn't activate your pineal gland. It doesn't wake you up in the middle of the night, or it doesn't give you the sense that it's daytime. Anyway, that's one of the little changes that I've made, and I fall asleep a lot faster now. The
Yeah.
sleep stories help too, right? But the whole point is, if you get too engaged with your phone, there's a new problem.
There is, yeah, yeah. And by the way, navigating, getting over that right now in these circumstances. So I struggle with sleep as well. But we can talk or do this interview between 1 and 3 in the morning Central Time because I'm awake all of the time. But checking the news feed is a bad habit of mine. I'm working to break it. All right,
Yeah.
so let's look at some of the topics, and I'm looking at the chapter listing in Thrive 9 to 5. Get focused, get creative, get motivated, accomplish more, think on your feet, learn more and learn it fast, make fewer mistakes, relate more, be more fair and less biased. Wow. And that's what I love. So anybody out there who's listening and thinking, oh, neuroscience, yuck. No, there's so much good science in helping us accomplish what Therese is highlighting with those chapters. I love Thrive the rest of your day. Make better decisions. Who doesn't need that? Stay healthier and feel less pain. Take charge of chronic stress. Manage intense moments of acute stress and support your better half. That may be the frosting on the cake for this whole great book. So, yeah, I mean, just the content is so eminently practical and fun to read. And I don't want to say light, but you have such a nice way of explaining these and sharing the tips. And you so easily bring in the research that it's not onerous at all. So, again, this may be a first in the world of neuroscience.
Well, thank you. Yeah, unfortunately, all too often, you want a bona fide neuroscience to be talking about the brain and about
Sure,
and
sure.
interpreting research findings. But unfortunately, as a group, we're not always the lightest. We're not always the most practical, right? We want to prove our stuff and get down into the weeds of the research. And so one of the things I tried to do was to avoid that misstep and just get bring you into the science, but also then keep it practical and keep it light so that you could be like, oh, I can do that tip right now. I feel encouraged. I feel motivated. So that's
You achieved that. So how do you classify this book? Are you classifying it as a self-help, or where does it fit in that spectrum?
So Mayo, it's published by the Mayo Clinic
Right.
Press,
Right.
and they classify it as self-help.
Hmm.
I certainly think of it as a combination. I really want to appeal to a business audience, so I could easily see it being with business books, but also I want it to fall under the science category, and
Hmm.
so I think bookstores might have trouble shelving it.
I was wondering, actually wondering where is it going to be in the bookstore? So
We'll find
maybe
out.
both, maybe both. It should
Maybe.
cover that real estate. Love the Mayo Clinic tie-in, by the way. I have a long history with the Mayo Clinic and a deep regard. My family has been helped immeasurably by the wonderful practitioners there. I actually went and taught at grad school management lessons from the Mayo Clinic because I'm just so amazed by it, and I've written about it. So, yeah, very cool that there's a tie-in. And if I understand, some of the proceeds of this book will go to the Mayo Clinic. Is that right?
That's right, to further research and to support patients. So it's good on all ends.
Sure. Yeah, fantastic. All right, so I have to ask you about what I've done today is I've been reading the book and taking notes. Here's what I did this morning, and it's only, slightly after noon Central Time here. I drank pretty big cup of coffee. I switched to black tea. I let the tea bag steep for a long time. I took a very cold shower. I couldn't do. I thought about going and jumping in the lake and doing a cold plunge. I didn't quite get the motivation to do that. I dressed in black for a period of time because creative people always dress in black, don't they? I listened to, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, binaural beats. I switched to tunes that give me chills. By the way, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Riviera Paradise, is one that gives me chills every time. I tried to give up multitasking. I was mediocre on that. I ate some turkey. I threw out my vision board. I burned my journal of positive affirmations, watched a scary movie clip, and reset my goals. How am I doing, Therese?
You have had a full day. Well, for those of you who are wondering why would he do bring up such random topics, these are all various strategies, and I give neuroscience behind them. And you might be thinking, yeah, eating turkey, help me out here, Therese, right? We can get into any of those, but I love your ambitions. You covered a lot of ground there this morning.
And it might be it's just a slight exaggeration. I really did think about going out and jumping in the lake, but the ice went out 2 weeks ago. The water temperature is about 45 degrees right now, and I guess that would have been a good cold plunge. So, all right, well, yeah, that was those were some of the tips, and again, some of those are the do these, and others don't do these, and those types of things that come out of it. Help me understand, and our audience understand. You talk about executive function and cognitive flexibility. Those are about as challenging as the terms get. So let's all get on the same page with those.
Sure. So we'll start with executive function because
Hmm.
this is a buzzword right now. Certainly for individuals with ADHD, they might have heard that their executive function can often be diminished compared
Hmm.
to individuals without ADHD. But all of us have some level of executive function, and executive function is the ability to make a plan, make decisions, make a plan for here's how I'm going to handle this long-term project, or here's how I'm going to handle my day. But it's also the ability to pivot when that plan doesn't work. So it's having a plan A, creating a plan A, but then on the spot being able to create a plan B. So being able to figure out how am I going to use the resources available to me? How do I adapt? If you're giving a presentation and the technology doesn't work, what are your options, right? Besides calling IT, for some of us, that's going to take too long. So what do we do? And so that would be executive function. And cognitive flexibility is one part of executive function. So there's memory, working memory is part of executive function, but the part that most
Hmm.
of us don't know about is cognitive flexibility. And that's that coming up with a plan B when plan A doesn't work. It's being psychologists and neuroscientists would define it as the ability to adapt to changing circumstances. So cognitive flexibility is something every leader needs. Every individual is going to benefit from it, but especially leaders because they might, if they're having an ask me anything,
Hmm.
you got to be the best at cognitive flexibility because you've got to handle those curveball questions. You've got to be able to figure out the implications of what you might say next. So that's cognitive flexibility. And it's something that we don't talk about often enough, but something that all of us can benefit from in our work lives, but also in your home life, right? You're planning your vacation weekend, and on Friday it turns out there's going to be bad thunderstorms. So, how does it change the plan, or do you go ahead with what you know
Right, right.
to do? Yeah.
So what's your, your one or two top approaches to strengthening or becoming more flexible, developing our cognitive flexibility?
So, one of the best strategies that's backed by neuroscience would be to get aerobic exercise.
Oh, I did
And
that too, by the way. I worked
did
out.
you do?
I did. I
Oh, good
ran on
job.
ran on the Peloton today.
Nice job. Oh, yeah, very well done. So, aerobic activity increases a number of different uh, chemicals in the body, neurotransmitters. But one of the things that it activates is lactic acid, which
Hmm.
I don't know about you, but I had this long, evidently disproved belief that lactic acid was bad for you, that that's what made your
That's where
muscles
the
sore.
stiffness from working, the day after working out, right?
Exactly, or doing a
Uh,
bunch of yard work, whatever it might be. But actually, that's not true. That's from muscle inflammation. It's not actually from lactic acid. But
hmm.
lactic acid serves a really good function in that it can cross the blood-brain barrier.
Hmm.
And what they found is for individuals who produce a lot of lactic acid right after aerobic exercise, one of the things that happens is they show better cognitive flexibility and better executive function. And the more
Hmm.
lactic acid you have, the higher the improvement in your cognitive flexibility and executive function. So lactic acid is believed to be one of the things that's tied to improved cognitive flexibility. So aerobic activity, and what they find is if you can do this right before you need to be at your best, so let's say you have a really important Zoom
Right.
call coming up, I'd recommend if you have stairs in your office or in your home, run up and down those stairs for 5 minutes. Not only does it get your heart pumping, it's going to give you a dopamine surge. It's going to help you really focus if you weren't already, but it's also going to improve your cognitive flexibility so that when you sit down for that Zoom call, you're able to adapt quickly to any curveball questions you might get.
I certainly had observed the change in my own, just how I felt and how I was able to deal with. I had a wonderful client. We had over 100 people in a session yesterday, and 45 minutes before, I'm on the Peloton again, and I'm because when I come off of it, I actually feel like I have some element of aptitude, or I find another gear, and I'm just energized and ready to go at it. So. Exercise, huh? Is there a type of exercise or a type of aerobic activity that's more beneficial than others? High intensity, low intensity, Tabata?
I love that you're into the acronyms. Good job. What researchers find is that moderate intensity is most effective for
Okay.
this. So moderate intensity would mean that you could talk with someone else, but you can't sing, right?
Hmm.
Not that most of us would try to do that while we're on the Peloton, but if you could, if you could talk to your partner, if you
Sure.
could talk to your wife while you're on there, you're okay. But if you were to try to sing along with whatever music you're listening to, you're not working quite hard
Not
enough.
hard enough, yeah.
That's right. So it's usually 50 to 75% of your maximum heart rate for those of you who are interested in heart rate. In terms of what they test in the lab, they usually test actually people on treadmills or on bicycles, but that's just because that's easier to do. For some
Sure.
people, that might mean swimming at the gym. For
Hmm.
others, that might mean a Zumba class, right? There's so many ways to do this. What they find is that the longer the time that you do the workout, the longer the benefits last. So
Hmm.
if you do 45 minutes on the Peloton, what they find is that the effects will last for at least 2 hours in terms of improved executive function. Potentially longer, to be honest, Art. After
Hmm.
2 hours, the researchers pulled the plug. We're like, we're out of here. We're done running this test.
That's
Well,
enough.
it might last 3, 4 hours. We don't
Right.
actually know, but
Right.
we know it lasts at least two. So for those days when your important meeting is coming at 11 a.m., at 8
Hmm.
a.m., it's worth doing a good 45-minute workout. What this has influenced for me is I try to do spin classes more
Okay.
often.
Hmm.
So I don't have a Peloton at home, but I try to get to the gym and do a spin class, or I'll try to at least get in a short run on days when I have a presentation. It's tricky because if the presentation's early in the morning, I don't want to look like a hot mess. But
Right, right, right.
you do what you can.
Absolutely. Yeah. Improvise, adapt. There's that cognitive flexibility, right? You
Yeah,
have to
exactly.
adjust
There's
and
cognitive
adapt.
flexibility inside.
So let's shift gears to getting creative and a little background context. I feel like I'm alone in the wilderness as an executive coach and leadership developer, talking about the need to infuse our workplaces and our teams with creativity.
Mm,
I think it's so critical. I've written 3 articles in the last year for Smart Brief on leadership about this topic,
mm.
and the response is a resounding crickets. So,
Oh,
and I bring creative modules into my programs, and those go very well because they're a lot of fun. But
sure.
I don't know that managers know how to coach people to stimulate creativity. And I think it can be a very personal issue as well. And of course, you're taking it, quite a bit from the tact of the personal individual. So what are some approaches we can use to stimulate creativity as individuals? And maybe one you might suggest we can try in the workplace with groups.
So it's really interesting. You mentioned that, jokingly, but maybe it
Yeah,
was accurate, that you had some turkey for breakfast.
I
So
did. Yeah.
you did, nice job.
Yeah.
Or you had it before we talked
Mhm.
here today. So I bring that up in the book and under the concept of creativity because
Sure.
getting a fair amount of protein, particularly from animal sources, but you can also get it from edamame, you get it from tofu. They just don't have quite as high levels
Hmm.
of amino acid called L-tyrosine, or we can just call it tyrosine. Tyrosine is a precursor to dopamine. And
Hmm.
so, I was having a conversation with someone recently and I was telling them about the benefits of eating protein as a way to get your dopamine levels higher. And she immediately said, she's like, wait, I can eat my dopamine? I didn't, no one's ever told me this. Like, well, it's not quite what you're doing. But what you're doing is by having high levels of, so protein, particularly animal sources, but like I said, also plant sources, have high levels of L-tyrosine, and that's going to boost your creativity. So for yourself, on a day when you know you're going into a brainstorming meeting, or you need to write a proposal and you need some creative resources and you don't want to
Hmm.
rely on ChatGPT to stimulate yourself ideas, eating a high protein breakfast would be a good way to go. In terms of then what that might mean at the workplace, so often when I've gone to events or in my own meetings, when people provide breakfast, it's all carbs.
They're carb loading. Yeah, it's horrible.
All
It is horrible. Yeah.
it's all sugar, which I
Yeah.
know is, easy because it can stay
Right.
at room temperature,
Right.
right? You can just stop at the donut shop on your way in. But a much better way to go, particularly for brainstorming meetings, or if you're going to have an all day offsite, that breakfast, if you're hoping, everybody cleared their schedule for this
Right.
offsite,
Right. Right.
make it a high protein breakfast. Have yogurt cups, have hard boiled eggs. Think about, could you do bacon, turkey bacon,
Right.
sausage, or even edamame? People would be delighted and surprised at the possibility of, edamame at breakfast. Oh, you're so innovative. But they're also getting a creativity boost by snacking on edamame rather than snacking on a Danish.
I love that. I mean, it's such a nice addition to many of the great research-backed practices. Big fan of Lee Thompson over at Northwestern and her work in the book Creative Conspiracy. Lee is kind of an academic mentor of mine. I've been in a number of her executive sessions, and she doesn't bring up that part of it. So that's great. I love that as kind of a precursor activity. What else? I see on the list, watching a funny video. Is that something that can be used to stimulate creativity?
This is a really interesting one. So often what can block creativity is that we're feeling stressed.
Okay.
And, there's a couple of different ways videos can help you out with your creativity. But by watching a funny video, you can help relax your body,
Hmm.
activate what's known as the parasympathetic nervous system. And the parasympathetic nervous system, or the PNS,
Hmm.
helps you relax. All too often when we're trying, particularly if we're under a deadline to be creative,
Right.
right? Our manager has asked us to get us something by 3 p.m. and you still only have one idea. Uh, because we're feeling stress and under pressure, our creativity goes down. Basically, stress is the killer of creativity.
Hmm.
So if you can reduce your stress levels, and that might mean, have some funny videos that you watch. Let yourself enjoy a 7-minute funny video. And I specify 7 minutes because researchers find that once you go over that tipping point of 7 minutes, people
Hmm.
often either A, feel like they've procrastinated and so they're getting frustrated and stressed again, or B, you start watching another video, right? And pretty soon you are
It's
procrastinating
like
because
reels on that one social media application. You can just keep going.
exactly one funny dog video after another. My husband and I often do this at dinner time. In any case, so you want to limit it to 7 minutes. So maybe set a
Okay,
timer on your
that's good to
phone.
know.
Exactly. I would set it for me, I would set it to 6 minutes so that I have a little bit of oh, just one more, just one more
Mhm.
minute, right? But 7 minutes, don't do it for longer than that. But it should activate your parasympathetic nervous system, and then go back into the creative task. And it, I have the way that I've tried this is on days when I'm feeling stressed about not something per se creative, but
Right.
something I know I need to, again, getting back to cognitive flexibility, where I need to be able to think on my feet and I'm anxious about that. Simply bringing down my stress response, watching a funny video. It's a surprisingly
Yeah, and
effective.
maybe like we're doing, laughing a little bit at it. So, yeah, by the way, you're showing amazing cognitive flexibility because I know you were more comfortable maybe with some advanced questions, and I'm like, I don't know. We're going to see where this goes. I love the book. We're gonna have an adventure here. So,
Thank you. I'm so
your
glad.
cognitive flexibility is amazing. So and I'm jumping back to getting focused and that listening to the right type of music, and particularly for those that might be a little further along in their life stage than others. Can you talk about your recommendation there for getting focused?
So I'm going to refer back to something that you mentioned in when you described, your perfect morning of
Right.
getting your brain to firing on all cylinders. And that's something called binaural beats. So
Mhm.
you can look it up. It's spelled Binaural. For
Mhm.
those who like etymology, it's referring to two ears, binaural. What researchers find is that if you put on a headset like I have right now, or put in your AirPods, and find a video. You can find them on YouTube, or there
Mhm.
are actually apps for binaural beats, but you want to find them at something called 40 hertz. And that means that's referring to the frequency. The reason that you need headphones is that with binaural beats, you're actually hearing two different sounds in your different
Ah,
ears,
okay.
right? So
Hmm.
it's whereas normally, at best, something might be stereo. These are actually two very different sounds at different frequencies going into the two ears, but it won't be distracting. Actually, what it does is it zips up your focus. All of a sudden it's as though the spotlight has gotten very narrow and very focused. And so you could do this in the background. You could have this playing, that you don't have to watch any video. And sometimes
Hmm.
they have music, sometimes they don't.
Sure.
I'd say start it without the music. You can move to music, and after you try it your initial time or two. But the reason that you want 40 hertz is what researchers find these binaural beats seem to do is they do something called entraining the brain. So
Hmm.
entraining the brain means that the brain can fire at different frequencies, or neurons in the brain can fire at different frequencies. And what happens when you listen to these two different sounds in the two different ears is your brain does a subtraction, and then the work to do the subtraction of the two, it
Oh,
actually begins firing at whatever that combined frequency is. So if it's 40 hertz, then the neurons in the brain, at least a majority of them, start firing at 40 hertz. What's beautiful about that is researchers have found that's the optimal frequency for focus and concentration. Lower frequencies, so if you look, you'll be able to find them at like 8 hertz, 10
right,
hertz, 12
right.
hertz, right? That's going to be good for going to sleep. You don't want that, right?
Yeah,
It's
that may
gonna
be for that middle of the night wake up.
middle of
Right.
the night, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, eight
Yeah.
eight hertz would be perfect for middle of the night. But if
Right.
you want for focus, is right about 40 hertz. And I this is one of the tools. This is the tool that I discovered during peak COVID, because it's now a rule that I have. If I sit at my computer and I'm here for more than 20 minutes and I haven't gotten started on the work that I set out to do by sitting down at my computer, I have to put on my binaural beats. It's
Oh,
just it's a little if-then statement that
uh,
I have. I move into my binaural beats, and I am not kidding, Art. Within 2 or 3 minutes, I'm so focused on the task. And on a really hard day, it might take 10 minutes, but pretty soon everything else just disappears, right? It becomes all
it's
about
just
whatever.
I mean, fascinated by that. That may be one of the more powerful in a whole list of great ideas and research-backed practices. That may be my favorite in the entire, because finding that concentration is sometimes so hard, especially in a world where we're kind of constantly bombarded by, different stimuli. So yeah, love that.
Exactly.
Love that.
I do
I,
too. I gave this tip actually to a swim coach who works with a Division I swim team,
okay.
and often what he needs to be doing is, they'll be in some situation where they're on the team bus and everybody's, they just done a meet and everybody's very excited, but he needs to focus because he's got something to prep for, a
Hmm.
communication he needs to send out, or he needs to do some scheduling. So I coached him I did some coaching with him. I coached him on the binaural beats, and he said, I can't believe it. It's as though the rest of the bus doesn't exist. Right? And you can imagine, a bus full of Division I men's swimmers, that's going to
Yeah,
need
no kidding. I'm sure. Yeah,
there's some
well, that's
energy there.
fantastic. Yeah.
Right.
I can't wait to put that one to work. I guess I tried it this morning. I made a mistake though. I played it through my stereo. I
Ah,
I didn't have the headphones, so I need to make an adjustment to that.
yeah, actually, what the researchers find is that can be, if you just play it in the ambient sound and
Right.
speakers, it can actually be more distracting. So you want the headphones.
Great.
Oh, and one quick caveat there. The
Yeah.
only the only additional piece of advice that I would give is
Hmm.
the first time you do it, just set a timer and only do it for 20 minutes. The reason that I say that is that what they find is if people go much over 30 minutes, at least the
Hmm.
first time or two, it
Hmm.
can people feel a little queasy. It goes away as soon as you stop listening, but I would set a timer just so you
Interesting.
don't move into that. So
Okay. Yeah. Queasy
it
is not good. So okay.
Easy's not good. Exactly.
Yeah.
It
All
goes
right.
away as soon as you stop them, but it could be enough of a deterrent. So just stop at 15, 20 minutes. By then, you should be so absorbed that you're surprised when your timer goes off because you've completely gotten into your task.
All right. So curious minds want to know what creates the queasiness in that setting. Is it the brain's extra work, or where does that come from?
I don't know. I don't know what causes that. Yeah, I'm not that kind of scientist. So good question. I'll have to look it up.
Please refer that to the other kind of scientists.
Exactly.
All
Okay.
right. So one of the things we all want to do is accomplish more. Without giving away the meat of the book, what's one tactic we can use to accomplish more?
I mentioned just earlier that I have this little rule, this if-then rule. So if
Right.
I'm at my computer for
Hmm.
roughly more than 20 minutes and I
Right.
find that I haven't gotten into whatever I sat down to do, I have to do some
Mhm.
binaural beats. I have to. I enjoy it,
Right. Yeah.
but it prompts me to use them. And what researchers find is these if-then statements are extremely helpful for improving productivity, although people
Hmm.
don't use them often enough. And there's two kinds of if-then statements. So there are if-then statements for temptations, right? And
Hmm.
so I just gave you
Ooh.
that example that I'm tempted by whatever else is on my computer or that I am interested in doing. That's not
Hmm.
my work. So I have an if-then statement. If I find I'm too tempted by blank, then I put on my binaural beats. And for me, I just set it as a time limit. But then there are also opportunity if
Hmm.
then. And so, an example of that, when I was writing my first book back in the early 2000s, the if then statement I had then, I bus commuted at that point in my
Hmm.
career. And my if then statement was, if I found a seat on the bus, then I was going to work on my book. So I'd open up my laptop, and rather than responding to emails or reading some document that I needed to prep for a meeting that day, I only worked on my book. And it was fabulous because I kid you not, I wrote most of that first book on the
Oh,
bus
that's
because I
amazing.
had
That's
half
amazing.
an hour each way every day, right?
I've applied some of that if then, if I'm on an airplane, I will not purchase or connect to the Wi-Fi because I value that time where I can think and I'm creative and I'm uninterrupted by anything. And yes, I don't have my binaural beats on, but I have music on. So that's one of my if then stay. You made me think of that there.
Nice. Because you're a captive audience, right? And there are no distractions. And what a luxury that is to have no distractions.
All right, so here's where Art, the armchair neuroscientist, picks a minor debate with the PhD bona fide neuroscientist. It's around goals
Okay.
and setting goals differently. And on the one hand, I like that you suggest we throw away the alphabet soup,
Yeah.
particularly SMART goals, which I think are dumb, but that's another topic for another
Mm,
day.
sure.
I am an advocate of, Locke and Latham's goal setting theory, which says at the end of the day, fewer, larger goals generates more learning, more performance. And I work with my clients with a concept called SLIM. So there we go with the alphabet soup.
Yeah, the
Again, I've
acronym.
added my own incarnation. You need to tell me if I need to quit practicing without a license here. Specific is good. Learning focused, because so many goals are more compliance and corporate are more compliance oriented. Attend a training class.
Mhm.
Learning focused. I, impactful. M, meaningful. And the final M, it's a double M. And slim is measurable. So learning, impact, and meaning are the
Mhm.
three that I really like. Doesn't make as cool of an acronym, LIM. So I've added the slim in there. What do you
Mhm.
think of that? Am I missing something here based on your research?
Well, so here's what I really, well, acronyms are nice because people can
Sure,
remember them
sure.
and they can litmus test, is the goal that I'm setting, does it meet these criteria, right? And so that's nice because you can remember the acronym. What I also like about it is, the learning, impact, and meaning, all three of those get at issues of motivation.
Hmm.
And so often when we're setting goals either for ourselves or for other individuals, for our teams, is that they aren't motivating, right?
Hmm.
They
Right,
feel
right.
you're checking a box.
There's no meaning behind them, personal or organizational.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're making some executive, we're making someone happy, or we're fulfilling
Right.
some protocol that we just unfortunately have to do, or we're redoing work that we've already done, but there's, something that was never communicated that's now been communicated, and so we need to redo the work. And so finding motivation can be something that I
Hmm.
think is often lacking, either for
Hmm.
individuals or for an entire team. And simply having to do it is not very motivating. And so what I like about that LIN is you're trying to seed the motivation,
Hmm.
either for yourself or for others. And I think that in that respect, that's going to be very effective in helping someone either own the goal, or at least, even if they can't own it, feel that it's something worth pursuing. So
Hmm.
in that respect, I think it's going to be, that's a, it's adding, it's adding motivation where there
Adding a
might
little more. Okay, so you're not going to give me a complete beat down on this topic. I'm not
be.
totally out of
No, no. And I think it's really interesting because with so many people working remote now, I know that more people have had to return to office,
Sure.
at least where I am in Seattle, where, Amazon and other corporations have required.
Microsoft and right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What's I think one of the things that's tricky for so many remote workers, even if you only have 1 or 2 days a week where you can still work from home, is that it used to feel, if you didn't feel motivated about a project for the project's sake, you at least felt motivated because you were seeing your colleagues and someone else, you kind of, they leaked their motivation and enthusiasm and you got to, ride on its
Right.
coattails,
Right.
right? um, but what I experience, at least in most Zoom meetings, is, people don't show their enthusiasm the way they do often in person. And everybody's kind of flat faced.
Hmm.
Only person who might be smiling might be the leader of the meeting, and you
Right.
can
Right.
tell they're trying extra hard, right? So I feel as though the contagious enthusiasm that we used to have about our work has diminished to some
Hmm.
degree. And
I
you
agree.
see,
I agree.
yeah,
Absolutely. I see it in my workshops. Although I'm comfortable with the Zoom-based workshops and can generate some energy, it's harder, and we have to work at it. And yeah, it's a narrower communication bandwidth than face to face. So
it is, right. There are fewer things that there's just so few, there are fewer cues that we can all
mhm.
respond to, right? So I like this idea of capitalizing on what would be other ways to increase intrinsic motivation, and learning, impact, and meaning would do it. So yeah,
Mhm.
good job.
Okay. All right. Good. 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 I appreciate learning that from someone that has credibility behind them and research. So, learning more and learning it fast.
Mhm.
Oof, big stuff. I actually, since this is, it's not all about me, but I'm going to make it about me on this one. I'm annoyingly not detail oriented. I've actually taken tests and had a CEO who was required some tests and a confused look on his face when he was reading my results, and I was there with him, and it's like, Fred, what's wrong? And he goes, well, it certainly says that you're intelligent, which, by the way, I don't know if that's true, but it says that, but you're not detail oriented, and I can't make sense out of that. How do I learn to become detail oriented? And I, by the way, that's a ridiculous out of left field question, but I'm curious what you think about it.
Well, I'm curious, can you give me an example of where you find yourself wishing that you were more detail
I
oriented?
can't see errors to save my life in my writing, and thank goodness for Grammarly. I can't see mistakes. They just disappear to me because when I'm creating or writing something, I don't see the words. It just disappears. I kind of get into a state of flow. As a result, I'm my own worst editor in the process. Or ask me to coordinate setting up meetings with 20 people in my workshop or so forth and so on. I just don't like detail work.
Right. Oh, that's so interesting. So if I were you, one of the things that might try, and maybe you've already tried this, is I'd start paying attention to, are there times of day when it's easier to do detail work?
Oh, yes. Okay.
Okay. So the
Mhm.
first thing is learning about yourself. And the reason that I bring this up is, we joke about there being morning people and uh, night owls, but this actually is an issue that
Mhm.
people have different times of day when they find that they do different things more effectively.
Mhm.
And and it can be affected by, not just your own rhythms for the day, but it can also be affected by what you've just eaten, right?
Sure.
Or whether you've eaten recently or not. So I would pay attention to, if I were you, start noting like, oh, I made more mistakes in planning that meeting, or I
Right.
found it hard to plan that meeting when I tried to do it first thing in the day, versus, oh, when I did this at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, like I found that I could pay more attention to the details. I'm just wondering if that might help because it could be different levels of focus. There could be a couple of different things going on there, but
I
I'd
do.
start by
I
no,
love
see,
that. Yeah, yeah. I do tend to parse my day out to creative work in the morning and administrative work in the early afternoon, and any work that happens after 4:30 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, not good.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you probably, so you said creative work in the morning. So it
Yeah.
suggests you're a morning person. Does that fit
Yeah.
with other
Yeah.
things about
Totally.
you?
Completely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So we tend to be most creative when it's our best time of day.
Yeah.
And so not trying to do the detail work. Then I'm not saying that you're going to do your detail work best on your best time of day.
Hmm.
But instead, if what you're, if your one of your big contributions to the world is big picture ideas, thank goodness you're here. So many of us need people like you who have big picture ideas, right? But what you might find is that ironically, it could be easier to do the detail work later in the day,
Hmm.
not because you're at your peak, but simply because that big picture perspective that you have
Hmm.
is has kind of been exhausted, and now you can say to yourself, okay, for instance, for me, when I proofread documents, I sometimes try to read them backwards, right? So
Oh, cool.
right? So Grammarly takes this away,
Yeah.
but you'll often, you'll notice things like, oh, I put too many spaces there, or whatever it
Mhm.
might be, right?
Right. Right.
Little things that you don't see when you're scanning it from beginning to end, because what researchers find is we actually skip words when we read things from the beginning to end. If
Mhm.
we look at them backwards, we're more likely to notice all the details. So just in terms of documents, that's like a mini strategy you can use.
That's great guidance. You should send me a bill for this little consulting session.
Too cute.
By the way, the CEO hired me, but he had a puzzled look on his face, so
Oh, good. I'm so glad. I'm so glad you didn't miss that job opportunity.
did not miss that one due to that flaw. I actually think so many of us can benefit by better understanding the rhythms and where we're at. And you said something. When that creative element is exhausted, is when I can begin to do the detailed work. And then when I'm exhausted, I shouldn't do anything other than maybe read or what have you, soak up
Yeah.
other ideas.
Yeah, so try the binaural beats later in the day. Don't do them right before bed because binaural beats at the 40 hertz binaural
We'll
beats
keep.
could be more awake. So
Ooh, I don't need that.
you don't need that. But at perhaps 3 or 4 in the afternoon, well before bedtime, I'm hoping for you, if at 3 or 4 in the afternoon, put on those binaural beats at 40 hertz and then get
Okay.
into the detail work and, let me know if it
I
helps you
will.
out.
I will absolutely provide feedback on that. So, hey, so you mentioned you use the binaural beats and you use if-then statements. What else of these research-backed practices in the book do you apply to your own situation?
I've got one right here. It's my green tea.
Aha.
Uh, so in the chapter on focus, one of the things that I dive into
Hmm.
is benefits of tea over coffee. So if you drink coffee, I'm not saying coffee is bad for you. There's actually fabulous research on how coffee can lead to cellular health benefits. It's not that
Hmm.
coffee is, I don't demonize coffee. But in terms of focus, researchers find that tea trumps coffee. And the reason that tea is more valuable is both coffee and tea contain caffeine, or at least, caffeinated tea
Right.
contains caffeine. But tea also contains an element that coffee doesn't have, which is L-theanine or theanine.
Hmm.
That's an amino acid, and that combination of L-theanine and caffeine, not only do you get the focus benefits of the caffeine, but the L-theanine seems to quiet a network in the brain called the default mode network. The
Hmm.
default mode network is basically it's running when you're distracted, right? It's involved in daydreaming. It's involved actually in creative tasks. The default mode network is important, and we want it to work. However, when you're trying to focus on something very specific that doesn't involve, you know, mind wandering, you
Hmm.
want that default mode network to quiet down. And that combination of caffeine plus L-theanine seems to effectively do that. The researchers also find that if you've had caffeine plus L-theanine, you can switch tasks, you can do
Oh,
multitasking much better. So
hmm.
for those of us who know it's going to be one of those days where we need to just focus on one project, but there's going to be a lot of interruptions, ah, caffeine plus L-theanine can really help you. So tea is a natural way to get both. You can take an L-theanine supplement if you're someone who's like Therese. Yeah,
Oh,
this is
interesting. Okay, I didn't realize that.
you
So,
can take,
by the
you
way, I
can have,
have my black tea working here right now as we speak. Um, by the way, I have my brand is Leadership Caffeine. I think you saw that I had shared your book in my newsletter. Do I need to change the name to Leadership L-theanine if I'm saying that? I'm not
well,
sure it rolls off the
I
tongue
don't think it
polite.
joke. No, I think leadership caffeine is better, but you can maybe do a quick promo for like, hey, by the way, caffeine plus L-theanine. Let's put this in your toolkit. Yeah.
Hey, some cool things in this fabulous resource. The try this sections that you summarize every chapter with. I love that. And I was so happy to see the appendix on quickest strategies for a better you. That was genius, Therese, to put that in there. So it looks like we can at a glance identify our situation and identify one of the approaches that you've suggested to apply in that moment. So just a great helpful tool.
Thank you. Yeah, at the back of the book, I realized that it would help me to have these all in one place. But I had actually created an Excel spreadsheet that I would refer to occasionally. And I thought, let's share this with readers in a nicer format. So it breaks it down by how long do these strategies take? What are they going to do for you? And what chapter should you go to read more? So it's a really quick handy guide that you could, turn to anytime you need ideas.
I smiled and said out loud, "Wow!" And there was no one in the house when I said it. It's that great of a resource
Yeah,
for all of us. So, what are your expectations and hopes for this book?
that's a lovely question. Nobody's asked me that, so thank you. My hope is that it reduces the wellness overwhelm. I think so many of us who enjoy productivity podcasts or wellness podcasts find that we're not really sure, well, if I only have time to do one thing today, what should it be, right?
Hmm.
And what I really wanted to do is, and my hope for this book is that when people have it in their hands, they can turn to that exact section that you referred to at the back of the book and say, okay, so what do I need most today? I need focus. Okay, what's a strategy that I can do for focus? Oh my gosh, I can do the binaural beats in the background, or I can have some tea, or what is the thing that I need to dial into? And so that's my hope for the book is that people can really use this. You don't have to read it cover to cover. Instead, you can go exactly to the
Hmm.
chapter you need
Right.
today, and whether that's supporting your partner or learning on the fly, whatever it might be, I want this book to be there to help you.
So well said. I'll make a bold claim, and we'll have to compare notes. And by the way, after this bold claim, you need to push your PR folks. I think this should be bigger than Carol Dweck's book,
Oh, wow.
which is titled what? How to Have a Better Day or How to Have a Good Day or something. What is the name of her classic book?
Mindset.
Oh, it's Mindset. Okay, and then the
Mindset.
subtitle is yeah, right.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I forget
Yeah.
what her subtitle is, but
Yeah,
yeah,
right, right.
mindset. Yeah.
Um, So practical, so many strategies and tools, just like you've done here. You explain the concepts in a way that we smile and understand and actually get. I would love to be a student in one of your classes.
Oh,
I'm hoping you're going to be out there doing workshops on this and working with corporate clients. This book should have a very, very long tail, and I believe it will meet and exceed the expectations that you just highlighted. So, congratulations and thank you.
thank you, Art. This has just been a joy. You have made my day.
Well, same here, Therese. Can't wait to support the book launch, and we'll chat soon. Take care.